amazing how graceful they move, and the ability to maneuver is unsurpassed. I've never seen an animal underwater able to make such tight turns.
I've never seen an animal underwater come so close and have such a playful nature.
Let's see if the little rope will get their attention.
Here we go. Look at this one.
Look at the way he mouths it.
First of all, they sort of feel it with their whiskers to test it out. They're so agile, they weigh their backs, they're so flexible, and can twist and turn in every way, can't they?
It's hard to remember you've got an acrylic dome protecting you when they come right in. It's very startling, especially when they open their mouth.
Being surrounded by sea lions underwater is wonderful, and there are few places in the world where they're so friendly. These remote islands are in the Pacific. The coast of Ecuador is 600 miles away. The only way to get around here is by boat, our temporary home. Whenever we anchored at a new island, we could never resist a quick trip ashore before getting ready to dive. With its teeming waters, sheltered bays, and inquisitive animals, what better place to start a series of underwater expeditions?
It's hard to believe that these are wild animals, but like all the other land animals here, these sea lions are easily approached and are famous for allowing such close encounters. But it's the marine environment that's brought us here. We're going to take a look at some of the less well-known creatures, the underwater animals. But I have my suspicions that they're going to prove a lot more difficult to get close to.
I'm afraid I share that suspicion. The reason we're here is because of the unusual, sometimes bizarre, concentration of animals that live here. These are the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador. They're famous for their land animals, but in fact, this barren, desert-like lava flow landscape sometimes supports very little life. In extreme contrast, the ocean surrounding the Galapagos is very rich and supports an enormous amount of life. As a matter of fact, to a large degree, the land animals depend upon this bounty from the sea for their survival. Without it, they couldn't live here. It's our plan to visit this bounty, see who these animals are and why they're here.
It was just impossible to resist spending more time with the sea lions, so we decided to leave the difficult dives until later in the trip.
These sea lions are, of course, marine mammals. And like other marine mammals, such as dolphins and whales, by coming into the water, they've had to make some very major adaptations. And one of those is surviving the cold, because water dissipates heat much faster than air. And to cope with that, they've got a thick layer of blubber under their skin, and they've got fur. Of course, they're playing here in shallow water, and they go to deeper water to feed. One major adaptation they've managed is to dive deep on one breath of air. Imagine a human being taking a breath of air, a snorkeler, and going down. He may stay down for maximum 2 minutes, more likely 1. These sea lions take a breath of air and can stay down for 20 minutes.
Look at what's happening to Peter's camera. They want to look nice underwater, so they pay very careful attention to the lighting.
It's like they're young children being very mischievous and pulling the camera cables and checking out, buzzing the lights. It's fabulous.
Look at them chewing on the camera cables back there. If they were to bite through them, we would lose picture, audio, everything. So if we vanish, it's not our fault, I promise. Oh, look, here's a bull. This could get interesting.
This is probably the main territorial bull that's holding a territory along this side of the coast.
The group surrounding us consists primarily of females and juveniles. It's very difficult to determine the sex of animals this age. But once they reach sexual maturity, the males outgrow the females, become quite large, 3 times the size, and have a bump on their head. They stay in these social groups until they reach maturity.
In fact, what the males do is they gather and protect a harem of females, and so they have to patrol their territory boundaries, both underwater and on land. And they do that not only by physical posturing and showing how big they are, but also by barking, and sometimes you can hear the bark underwater.
Hi there.
Doesn't seem at all aggressive to me.
Doesn't seem very interested in interfering with what's going on, just sort of staying on the periphery and observing, making sure we're not interested in his females. Heading this way, see if anything happens. Now, I'll bet that was a warning.
They can get very obstreperous and come up, and a number of people here have been bitten by them. And the way to put off a bull is to clap really loudly, but I don't think that works underwater, does it?
These islands are better known for the animals above the surface, made famous, of course, by Charles Darwin with his then revolutionary ideas about the evolution of new species. Seabirds do particularly well here, and because there are no land predators, they can nest wherever they like. The islands are on the equator, so for much of the year it's extremely hot here. Maintaining the right body temperature is critical, and many rely on the unexpectedly cold water to cool off. For others, the scorching sun is absolutely essential.
Like all reptiles, marine iguanas are cold-blooded. So before they can get going each morning, they have to bask in the sun. Iguanas eat seaweed. They prefer to feed on rocks exposed by low tide. That way, they can maintain their body heat. But when high tide is at midday, when the air is hot and the iguanas are warm and active, they have to move to where the seaweed is now found, underwater.
It's a real challenge just to find iguanas in the water. Our first attempts to follow them through the surge were disastrous. We couldn't maneuver in the rough shallows wearing scuba tanks and bubble helmets. So we abandoned all our sophisticated breathing apparatus and used snorkels. While we were buffeted by the surge, the iguanas seemed oblivious to it. Their strong claws are perfectly adapted for clinging onto the wave-swept rocks. They may look prehistoric, but they're very efficient feeders. Their blunt snouts and sharp, chisel-like teeth are ideal for grazing this carpet of seaweed. They soon get chilled at sea. Their temperature can drop as much as 10 degrees centigrade. Hungry or full, they must clamber out to soak up more of that equatorial sun.
Marine iguanas are found throughout the islands, but they do best where the water is cold and full of nutrients, ideal for seaweed. This water is also rich in plankton, and as a result, fish teem and their predators thrive. The islands are swept by a mix of warm and cold currents, which make the place unique, but also make the waters unpredictable and dangerous to navigate. One current brings warm water from Central America, another sweeps up from the Antarctic, and a third moves deep within the Pacific, bringing cold water from the west.
it hits the Galapagos, it wells up to the surface and supports some rather surprising residents, penguins.
Here on the equator, penguins have found ways to cope with this intense heat. They tolerate it because the cold water offers rich pickings. Again, we chose to snorkel. This time the problem was not so much the surge, but rather the sheer speed of the penguins. As usual, we were accompanied by an inquisitive sea lion. Penguins are timid. To swim with them requires a great deal of patience. At first, all we saw was a quick glimpse as they flew by. We couldn't possibly keep up.
The only time they did stick around and appeared to ignore us was when they were distracted by the prospect of a good meal. Penguins, faced with a school of shimmering fry, have to home in on one fish in order to be sure of success. Their technique is to rush into the school, breaking it up, confusing and snapping at a few fish before returning to the surface for another breath.
It wasn't only penguins disturbing the fish. They seemed oblivious to us, so we simply watched and enjoyed the spectacle. Not far from the cold-loving penguins are warm-water coral gardens. Somehow or other, almost certainly during their larval stage, these fish drifted across the vast Pacific Ocean and colonized the islands. The larvae of Moorish idols are robust, hardy voyagers. Mayer's butterfly fish are more vulnerable, a rare treat here. An adult leather bass, one of the reef's predators. It's quite different as a juvenile, well camouflaged in the arms of a sea urchin. And lurking under a soft coral, the deadly master of camouflage, the scorpionfish, lies in wait. Because the Galapagos are so isolated, many families of fish are only represented by 1 or 2 species. This is the only angelfish found in the islands, but it's done well and we saw it almost every dive.
But in the Galapagos, coral is only a passing attraction. The islands are volcanic, and much of the underwater scenery is made up of steep cliffs, the sides of enormous volcanoes. Above water, we see only the tips. Beneath the surface, they plummet, 10,000 feet to the ocean floor. As the lava flowed and cooled, the volcanoes eventually emerged above the water and layer upon layer built these magnificent islands.
Today, after years of erosion, these lava steps form ledges, grazed by sea urchins, colonized by soft corals, ideal for turtles to sleep on.
Feel a little like a search for a needle in a haystack on this one.
Yeah, looking for turtles is quite chancy, isn't it? And even if we do find them, they usually swim off.
Not to mention, they're deeper than we generally can get.
Yeah.
I think that it would be nice to see them laying on the ledges like this. Any animal that can take a breath of air and stay 2 hours underwater has my respect. You can see one down there now. Want to try it?
You can try it, but it'll swim off though. Yep, there it goes.
As usual.
Turtles spend almost all their life in the water, only coming ashore to lay eggs. Most are known to migrate thousands of miles, but there's some doubt about the long-distance movements of this Galapagos population. They may be permanent residents. While admiring the grace of turtles, it's easy to forget that volcanic activity still disturbs these waters.
This may look like a familiar sight to scuba divers, especially if they dive in areas where there are caves. As you enter a cave, your bubbles go up to the roof and percolate through. On top of it, it looks very similar to this. But there are no caves beneath us, and there's no other divers around. The Galapagos Islands is still very active volcanically, and this is evidence of that.
So underneath of us, there's a big magma chamber with lots of molten rock. And seeping up from that is all this gas. Quite straightforward, but it can blow up any minute.
Which isn't as outrageous a statement as it may seem. The Galapagos were born from the sea just a couple of million years ago, so geologically speaking, that they're still infants. And as a matter of fact, about every other year, they still have volcanic explosions. Very near here.
Come, put your hand down here, it's warm. It's really warm, it's like a bath.
It's hot down there.
Isn't it?
You obviously can't feel the heat, but we can show you visually how hot it gets.
If I haven't broken it already. Thermometer.
It's already moving. Matter of fact, it's shooting up. It's gonna go off the scale.
Better take it out. That's when thermometers explode.
It's past 120.
We saved the thermometer, and fortunately the fumarole didn't blow up. But after a dive like that, we needed some light relief, so we welcomed the invasion of our boats.
This is what happens when mom's away. The governing mother is out feeding at the moment, the larger females, and they've left the kids at home to play.
There are so many of them. So playful too, look. Ooh.
These are all less than a year old. Their sense of play is probably a lot more than meets the eye. Although clearly they're having fun, they're also gaining skills that will become important to them later in life. Or for that matter now, because they're just now learning to catch their own food and avoid predation.
You can actually see, hello, the her toenails coming out that she used to scratch herself. Do you see? On her back flippers. I'm not the one molesting you, it's this guy.
There's some toenails. Up.
Hello. She's very affectionate, isn't she?
Up for air, that was great.
They seem so relaxed underwater, don't they?
Look at the one under the boat right now. It's almost asleep right under the hull of the boat.
The Galapagos may be remote, but they are not short of variety. It seemed we were to find something new every dive.
Those guys are a classic example of an animal that has come here and had to adapt in a major way. The Galapagos Islands are the only place in the world they live, and they obviously are doing quite well.
This is amazing.
They're so thick, I can see 3 or 4 feet into them, and that's about as far as I can see. Solid scales and fins, and a lot of eyeballs.
You can sure feel the advantage of safety in numbers here, can't you?
Absolutely. If you were an individual amongst a group this size, you would have to feel extremely safe.
Let me tell you what's down there. There's sand and rocks and more fish.
There's a sea lion again. They're predators on these fish and are faced with a very interesting dilemma when seeing a wall of fish this size. Often the predator will view a school of fish not as individuals, but as sort of a mass, and it's confusing to them. So what they'll do is go into the school and try to extract a small portion or individuals from the group.
Getting enclosed again. I wouldn't like to be plankton with these guys coming up.
No, neither would I. I think that if I were drifting into the Galapagos Islands on a current and saw this, I'd start swimming really hard to find another group of islands.
The isolation of the islands has allowed many new species to evolve here. This grouper is also endemic and is an important catch for local fishermen. Most animals on these remote, inhospitable islands have been spared commercial exploitation, but one with a really valuable commodity, fur, came close to extinction. This prized victim is also endemic. Galapagos fur seals were slaughtered by the thousand for their pelts. Today they're found in shady grottos, seeking shelter from the heat of the day.
There are 2 just here behind you, Mike. And I think there's their fur seals. If you get very close to them, you can actually tell the difference quite easily. Because fur seals have much bigger eyes, because they're nocturnal feeders and have to see well in the dark. They also have ears that stick out and actually make them, I think, look quite comical.
I do too. It's easier for me to tell them apart by the behavior. The sea lions tend to be much more active in their play than the fur seals, although these guys are moving around. They're more passive. They seem like they don't have as much energy to burn. Tend to hang around on the surface. What a face. Look at the size of their flippers. Much larger than the sea lions.
Make some excellent climbers. See, look, vertical rock.
Their coat has a coarse outer layer and a downy inner one, which is what makes it so soft and made it so popular. Inevitably, their numbers crashed and hunting became uneconomical. The surviving seals were left alone. Later, they were given official protection, and gradually they've overcome their fear of man.
If you wonder what we're doing, it's as it appears. We're waiting for hammerheads. This area is frequented by large schools of hammerhead sharks, which don't like divers approaching them. Apparently the bubbles irritate them, and they keep a distance. Now, I find it really frustrating seeing them so far away from us out in the mist like that. I want to swim out to them and get closer, but it doesn't work. They just keep moving away.
I think you're being very difficult, Mike. I think seeing 30 or 40 hammerheads swim by
That's true.
is exciting enough. But it's one thing to swim over your shoulder and you're looking out to sea. You see a little shadow coming and suddenly one emerges. That's exciting.
And what about that head? That is a strange design for underwater, isn't it?
Well, my reckoning is that it spaces out the eyes to give them a bigger field of vision.
That's true. Also, all elasmobranchs, the shark family, have these little pits on the bottom of their heads that detect minute amounts of electricity. And the hammerheads can swim over a sandy bottom where fish and stingrays may be buried, and detect them buried under the sand and feed on them, where otherwise this prey item would be invisible to them.
It was a long wait, but worth it. Hammerheads were one of the animals we'd both been really keen to find. Diving in the Galapagos is exciting and unpredictable, like swimming round a corner and finding a cave filled with thousands of fish. For me, the tremendous thing is that there are so many animals to encounter and unknown places to explore.
Darwin first drew attention to the Galapagos Islands, and we've become very familiar with what's on land here. But the underwater world is equally unique and will continue releasing its secrets to scientists and divers alike. I eagerly await the opportunity to return to this fantastic sea of surprises.